question. If we are created as pure consciousness, why would we incarnate for the first time? To experience cruelty, get unhealthy psychological patterns from our parents, and then try to resolve them through multiple incarnations. Children are born with pure mind, and then they learn what is good and bad based on their family system. This means their destructive behavior when they grow up is not the result of a low level of consciousness or dark entities influencing them, but the result of poor parenting and ignorance. Okay, so I have in several videos talked about why we actually incarnate. I talk about it in my video about how the world was created. And just to give a very brief summary, we have a higher self. And this higher self wants to grow. And in order to grow, it wants to have experiences in the world of form. That's the whole purpose of the world of form, is that the higher self starts out with a certain point-like sense of self and expands it by experiencing and interacting with the world of form. So what I have also explained is that we here on earth, we have a completely distorted view of creation of the world and the purpose of the world, because the earth is an unnatural planet. There are planets that are natural planets, where you don't find the selfishness, murder and mayhem that you see on earth. So you have to understand that your higher self, your spiritual self, had many, many experiences before your existence here on earth. So it had grown to a certain status. And probably by sending extensions of itself to natural planets. So an I Am Presence can come to a point where it sees that there is something called an unnatural planet, and it desires to have the experience of what it is like to be in incarnation on an unnatural planet. And as I explain also, the I Am Presence can't descend into embodiment, but it can send an extension of itself, which is what I call the conscious you. And the conscious you is pure consciousness or pure awareness or neutral awareness. But the reason why I say this is that this is contrasting the conscious you with the outer personality. So you understand, the conscious you is not the outer personality that we have right now. Right now, you see yourself as a particular human being who grew up in a certain environment. But the conscious you is beyond this. And the reason why it's important to see it as pure awareness is this means that the conscious you can step outside the outer personality and therefore directly experience. It's not a theory, you understand. You can directly experience you're more than the outer personality. You are not defined by the outer personality. Which means you can look at the outer personality, what I call these subconscious selves, from the outside, and you can deliberately and consciously free yourself from these selves so that you do not experience life as suffering. So, second part of the question talks about children are born with a pure mind. This is traditional psychology, which is based on materialism, which denies reincarnation. It's complete fallacy. Reincarnation is a reality. A child is not born with a pure mind. It is born with a psychology it has built up over many, many lifetimes. Now, how did it build up that psychology? By reacting to conditions on Earth, on this very unnatural planet, where we have all been attacked and abused by what I call the fallen beings. I explained this again in my video about how the world was created. So, you have to realize here two things. First of all, your I Am Presence sent the conscious you into embodiment on earth because it wanted to experience earth. And your I Am Presence has had a positive learning experience from everything that the conscious you has encountered on earth. The other thing you need to recognize is that the conscious you, it's an extension of the I Am Presence, but when it goes into embodiment, it will see itself as a being here on earth. And it will make decisions based on that, and it will experience life in a different way than the I Am Presence does. So I've explained in several videos we have two options. We start out seeing ourselves as connected beings. We know we are connected to our higher selves. But then you have the option, we can either grow in connection or we can go into separation. And it's only when we go into separation that life becomes suffering. So there is no law or guarantee that we will experience life on earth as suffering. But it is, given the conditions on the earth and how dense it is, fairly likely that we will all go through that experience. But the thing is, nothing we experience on earth can alter the conscious you, because it's always pure awareness. The thing is, the conscious you is given free will. And therefore, if the conscious you chooses to go into separation, it will experience life through these subconscious selves that it creates. And that's why life will be experienced as suffering. And the conscious you can forget that it's a connected being. But the whole idea of a spiritual path is that the conscious you can come to remember who it is. And therefore free itself from these subconscious selves that causes it to experience life as suffering. So in other words, if you look at it from a bigger perspective, nothing can change the conscious you permanently. And any experience you have of life as suffering is had through one of these subconscious selves, which is unreal. It's based on an illusion. It's not permanent. And what you need to do as the conscious you is to see the illusion and let the self die. Then you are free of that. And you are not experiencing life as suffering. I have proven this. I know many people who have proven this. Over the ages, thousands of people have proven this, even though they didn't have the concept of subconscious selves. They have still overcome the psychology. But you realize that the purpose of all of this is really the growth of the I Am Presence, which grows in consciousness. And when you, the conscious you, when you resolve a certain amount of these selves, you will stop identifying yourself with or as the outer personality. And you will start identifying, blending with, connecting to the I Am Presence. And therefore you will connect to the positive experiences that your I Am Presence has had as a result of the conscious you being an embodiment on earth. I know this is probably not going to comfort people who are experiencing life as very difficult. It will take work, it will take time to resolve enough of these reactionary selves that you don't have a reaction to things on earth anymore. But you can come to that point. That's what many people have demonstrated throughout the ages by walking a spiritual path and overcoming what the Buddha called attachments. And again, I know this will not really, it won't help people at a certain level of consciousness understand this, because you're experiencing life as such intense suffering. And I don't really know that I have anything to say that will comfort people at that level, because you need to come to that point where you realize, you experience that you are more than your current state of mind, your current sense of self. Because that's when you can stop feeling so trapped. I think really suffering, the core of suffering is that you feel trapped, you feel powerless, you're in a situation that's unpleasant, you can't change it. But the whole idea of these teachings that I'm giving is that no matter what the situation is, you can change it. Because if you can't change the outer situation, you can change your experience of the situation, your reaction to it. And that's the start of the process where you start taking control of your mind And the way you do this is basically to realize that nothing on earth defines you. I am not this outer circumstance. I am not this outer self. I am more than this. And when you begin to experience and connect to that more, all of a sudden the suffering won't be as intense because you won't feel so trapped. Because now you will see there is a way out. And once you connect to that there's a way out, you are on this gradual path where your suffering diminishes, the intensity of the suffering diminishes. And as you go further on that path, you begin to really believe and experience that you can overcome the suffering. And you can actually come to a point where life on earth really isn't as bad as it used to be. And you can even come to a point where you are enjoying it, you are flowing with life, and you are having, even at the level of the conscious you are having a positive experience of being on earth. But you also connect to the I am presence and the experiences it has had and the wisdom it has gathered by you being an embodiment, and you can actually come to a point where you make peace with having been an embodiment, and you see it as a positive experience. I know this will probably take some time for many people, but it's definitely a process that's possible. Let me just see if there was something here that I didn't comment on. Well, children are born with a pure mind, and their destructive behavior when they grow up is not the result of a low level of consciousness or dark entities, but the result of poor parenting and ignorance. Well, the situation you have on earth is you have the majority of people on earth have gone below this level, gone into separation. They see themselves as separate beings. This means that over many lifetimes they have created a very complicated psychology, many of these what I call subconscious selves. So you have a child that's born into what you call a dysfunctional family, where the parents have severe psychological issues. Yes. Those psychological issues the parents have built up over many lifetimes. But why is the child born there? As I've said in other videos, there's two reasons. One is that the child is actually on the spiritual path, and it chooses to be born in that family either to give the people an opportunity to grow or to give itself an opportunity to grow by overcoming something in its psychology. This is one possibility. The other possibility is that the child has a similar psychology as the parents and therefore karmically attracts itself to the situation. In other words, the child is not a clean slate. And, you know, when they grow up, it's the result of poor parenting. Well, of course, poor parenting, when the parents have psychological issues, plays a part of it. But it doesn't create the situation in the child. It reinforces what the child carries with it from past lifetimes. It's just the reality of the situation. So you can't really see the problem I have with this. I'm a spiritual person. I'm always looking at is something empowering or disempowering. And traditional psychology, worldly psychology that doesn't acknowledge reincarnation, it is disempowering because it can only reason, oh, the child is a blank slate. So whatever happens to the child, it's the result of poor parenting. But this is disempowering to the child because the child, what can a child do? If you're 20 years old and you go to a psychologist who says, tell me about your childhood, and you tell about an abusive childhood, and the psychologist says, oh yeah, it's your psychology is just a result of poor parenting. What can the child do about that? Or the 20-year-old person? What can they do about it? You can't change the past, right? But what I'm saying is that in reality, you need to look at why did I attract myself to that kind of situation? What did I need to learn from it? Was it that I have a similar psychology as my parents that I need to overcome? Or was it that I can't say no, for example, and I won't set boundaries for myself? Whatever it may be, you can now look at yourself and say, what can I overcome? And if you overcome the psychology, that was reinforced or brought out by your dysfunctional childhood, you will be free of that psychology, and therefore you will grow and your entire life experience will change. That's empowering. And to me, as a spiritual person, that's all that matters. And that's why I'm saying this whole idea, and you find in traditional psychology, that a child comes in on a blank slate and it's all a matter of the parenting, what the child becomes, it's just totally disempowering. And it doesn't have any appeal to me whatsoever, because I have always known that I have the potential to take command over my state of mind and improve my state of mind and raise my state of mind beyond all limitations. And that's what's been my goal my entire life, and I know thousands of people who are on the spiritual path who have the same goal. And that is the most significant movement in modern societies, is these people who are taking responsibility for themselves, for their own psychology, or saying, I will not be a victim of my parents and my childhood. I will not be a victim of my society. I will not use any excuses. I will do whatever I can to transcend my psychology and have a better life experience. They may not see it in terms of a spiritual path. I mean, I see, when I was a child, back in the 60s, nobody went to a psychologist unless they were brought there in a straitjacket. Today, so many people among the young generation, they go to psychologists, or not just psychologists, but they go into various forms of therapy, often alternative therapies. They don't necessarily see it as a spiritual thing, but they know they want to overcome their psychology. And I think when we look back at this 100 years from now, it'll be seen as a really, really significant movement in society, because it really started changing everything in society. Because my parents, they thought they were just a victim of the psychology of their childhood. I never accepted that, and I see many more young people who don't accept that either. And that will change society more than anything else. Because what is a society? It's a product of the people's psychology. The only way to really change a society is to change the people's psychology.